Greetings and welcome to another edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. So, the fourth episode of the third season of Star Trek Discovery has been released, and I want to get right to my review. As usual, I've taken some notes. I'm just going to sort of go through them and tell you what I thought of the episode. The first thing I noticed is that, again, they're using these little, I don't know if they're just repair bots or if they serve other functions, but repair bots, I'm going to call them. Repairing the ship on the outside, seeming to do other tasks on the inside. They just fly around. These did not exist at the time that that ship was built, and they've never been seen after. They weren't on the flagship of the fleet 100 years later. They weren't anywhere on Voyager. Why do they have to keep using them? That's what kills me. It's not like they were writing a story and they needed to write in this technological thing that didn't exist in the time period in order for the story to make sense, or in order to even tell a story about, I don't know, artificial intelligence, for example, and how people interact with it. And they're just making crap up that wasn't, in existence at the time for narrative purposes. I still would say don't do it, but at least you could say, okay, that's the whole story. And it was necessary to tell the story. They had to come up with that thing. These robots are not at all necessary to the story. They're bells and whistles. They're added in purely for aesthetic purposes, purely for, to make the show look futuristic. It's pure CGI for the sake of CGI. It annoys me to no end. And they don't even go to the trouble of saying, hey, we added these robots. They're kind of like our repair robots, but they are even smarter. They can do other things. We acquired them since we've been here in 3189. No, they don't do that. They just show the robots flying around the ship. I can't even. It's like they don't care. They don't care. They're just writing crap in to make the show look cool. It's just wrong. We did get to see the Trill homeworld in this episode, which is cool. I don't think we ever did see it on Deep Space Nine or Next Gen. So that was interesting. We didn't see very much of it. But they did go to the Trill homeworld. We learned a little bit more about how symbiotes work, which I didn't have an issue with, but boy, were those scenes kind of goofy and just bad. I have resisted for a long time, attacking the writing on this show. I focused on other things about it that I didn't like, but I'm starting to see what people don't like about the writing. The writing on this show is very amateur. It's very ham-fisted. It's very pedantic. You can almost see the wheels, the hamster turning on the wheel in the writer's head as they're trying desperately to get from A to B in order to move the story forward, as opposed to writing stuff that tells a story. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's writing that, makes the circumstances clear to the viewer in a way that makes the story deeper. They did a lot of that on Next Gen and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and in the original series movies. And it's something that they're not doing on Discovery. They just write these scenes that bop, 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 point A, point B. It's almost like they have one of those things, that piano players use. I forget the name of it. I'm gonna have to put it up on the screen when I remember it later. But those things, it's almost like the writing is keeping time to the skeleton of the story, not the narrative of the story. There's a difference. There's getting from point A to point B, and then there's telling a story, and these scenes just exist to go from point A to point B. And what you get, especially when that kind of writing is being done around characters that are only going to show up once and never again, is you get these characters that feel extremely one-dimensional. Like they don't do anything but behave in that way. They don't have any nuance. They don't have any depth of character. They're single-minded, and they have just one dimension. And it's just bad. Even when they're just there for an episode because the episode is about a certain thing and it involves these people, and then it's not gonna, they're not gonna come back. That's fine, but they don't have to be so one-dimensional. And so it's bad when you can visualize the script being written as the actors are talking. It's just bad. And I'm talking about the scene where they meet the Trill like council or whatever it is, and they're having this conversation about the symbiont that's in the human character. It's just so bad. It's so bad. But we'll get more into what happens in this episode on Trill as my review goes on. But the Trill planet is mentioned early in the episode, so I don't know, I got ahead of myself, but there's more to that. But let me backtrack and talk about the fact that once again they used the spore drive. Why? I guess, I don't know, the way that, at least this time, I have to say they did sort of play it off as, okay, we're trying not to use the warp drive because dilithium is finite, in this time period, and we don't want to overuse it. But it's like they have a ton of it. They showed off that they have a ton of it in the second episode, and dilithium crystals, don't burn out like your iPhone battery. Where you unplug it, and then at the end of the day, it's the batteries that they don't drain that quickly. So I don't know. I suppose in the long term it makes sense, but I don't know why they would do that. They have the spore drive. It should be the backup, right? They should proceed as normal, and then use the spore drive if dilithium supplies start to get low. And don't forget, they know how to recrystallize dilithium in 3189. And in fact, before they left their original time period, they figured out a way to recrystallize dilithium. So, as stupid as that was, but I just don't understand it. They're using the spore drive to use the spore drive, and I just want them to forget that. Just stop reminding me that you came up with this stupid thing that doesn't show up later. Stop using it. Just use the warp drive. Besides which, they keep saying how it's damaging stamets. Well, stop it. We don't know where in space they are. They were at Earth, so they were in the Alpha Quadrant, whether they started out there or not. They were in the Alpha Quadrant. If I'm not mistaken, Trill is in the Alpha Quadrant, right? So how far away is it? Like, it's not like it's going to take years, right? A couple of days, a couple of weeks. Just, I don't know. I'm spitballing. But how long does it take to get from one point to another within the Alpha Quadrant? I don't know. I don't think they should be using the spore drive. It just drives me insane. Then when they get to Trill, they show the communication, that takes place between Saru and the Trill homeworld people. And when he says open a channel, I'm expecting, it's going to show up on the view screen. Nope. They keep reminding us that on this ship, they have holographic communications. It's like the robots. Why? The answer is just to do it. They need to stop doing it. It's bad enough that in the first 2 seasons, you kept breaking the fourth wall and reminding me that you're using this technology that this ship shouldn't have. Stop doing it. You jumped 1,000 years into the future to get out of the trap of continuity problems, and you keep having continuity problems. You keep writing continuity problems into the show. The continuity problems on that show were very infrequently anything that had to do with what was going on outside the ship in that time period, if ever. It was stuff going on the ship during that time period. So I don't know what they avoided by jumping into the future. Maybe if they're going to keep doing this, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Of course, they never admitted that that's why they jumped to the future, but that's why they jumped to the future. And they just keep doing this stuff. Stop it. I don't know why I still expected it to show up on the screen. When the hologram appeared, I went, oh yeah, that's right. On this ship, they have the stupid holograms. I have a question, and this is not like a major thing. I'm just trying to check my memory. So maybe somebody can answer it for me in the comments or to my email, which I'll put up on the screen. Where's the email going to go? It's like right over here. Is it my failing recollection, or did they not, in the first 2 seasons of Discovery, have their terminal screens, their console screens, just projected into the air? Because like in this episode, there's a scene where Michael Burnham has like a projection in the air in her quarters, and she's trying to figure something out, and she's moving stuff around, you know, kind of like Iron Man in Iron Man the movie, you know, and she's touching different things, and it's in the air. But then they keep showing screens on the bridge and in engineering that are on transparent like glass or transparent aluminum. You know, and it's physical, it's there, and they're touching it, and there's something physically there that they're you know, operating when they're doing their jobs. But in the first 2 seasons, that wasn't the case, right? That everything was just projected into the air, right? Am I remembering that correctly? I don't know. It doesn't matter if they're still doing it, like in people's quarters on the ship. But at first, I thought maybe they you know, quietly got away from that and went at least to transparent screens, so it didn't look quite as out of place for the time period. But I don't know. That just could be my faulty memory, and I just wanted to bring that up. So if somebody could let me know if I'm remembering that correctly, so I don't have to go back and look. But anyway, that's the thing about screens. Then we have the scene where Dr. Culber goes to Michael's quarters to convince her to be the person who goes with, is it Adira, down to the Trill homeworld. And of course, he's doing this because Michael has to go, right? Because the friggin' show is about Michael. It's the Michael show. She's the main character. Because Saru says, you know, my doctor will go down with her. But it has to be Michael, right? So the doctor has to go and make that make sense, right? So they write this little scene where he says to her, her problem is not medical, it's emotional. And she needs emotional support. Well, I have a couple of questions. He checked her over and said everything was fine. So where is he getting this idea that it's not a medical problem? And to the extent that he doesn't know about the Trill host's physiology and so forth, that would mean that it could be a medical problem, but he's not sure. So how can he say definitively, oh, her problem's not a medical problem? Well, how do you know that? How do you know it's emotional? You're not a Trill doctor. You don't have experience with Trill symbionts. And if you do, you haven't said that. So I don't know, maybe that's me just speculating. Maybe he does have Trill symbiont experience. But if that's the case, why did they bother going to Trill? Why didn't he know enough to try to figure it out? I don't know. It just seems all muddy to me. But anyway, I wrote down, how does he know it's not a medical problem? Maybe there's something about it that is a medical problem that he can't detect, even if he does have some Trill experience, right? Because the Trill would be better at that regardless if he has experience with, he wouldn't be as good as them, right? This is, you know, probably. I just thought it was dumb that he said that. Then he says she needs emotional support. Okay. Why can't it be you? Why can't you be the emotional support person? Even if Michael goes, why wouldn't you still go? Because her body is human and they're not human doctors. Like, you know, you're the best person to treat anything that's already in place or that might occur in the case of in the case of a human body versus the Trill, even if they have experience. So why wouldn't you still be going? Like, I just, This is why people are attacking the bad writing on the show. And I didn't see it in the beginning. I'm seeing it now. That was dumb. You should have gone one way or the other. It's just stupid. Then Michael tells Adira that 10 minutes after she got out of the suit, or when she got out of the suit, the time suit when she first landed, she threw up. I don't remember that. I could go back and check, but I'm pretty sure she didn't throw up in that first episode right when she got out of the suit. So I don't know, maybe again, that's just my memory, but I found it interesting that they put that in there. So then they get down to the Trill homeworld and they see those people. And we already talked about how bad that scene was. You know, just the lines that they say are just so pedantic and so one-dimensional, and it just drove me insane. So, but we already talked about that. So then shit goes haywire. Michael is ordered to leave the planet with Adira. And when they are sort of attacked by some of the Trill people that greeted them, or ambushed, I should say, she defends herself and Adira from them by stunning them. And Adira says, well, that wasn't Starfleet protocol. Not that she'd necessarily know that, but it's a good assumption. And Michael says, no, it wasn't. Okay, first of all, I have two things to say. Seems like it probably would have been Starfleet protocol to me to defend yourself by stunning people. And secondly, if it wasn't, well, of course it wasn't, because that's Michael. So either way there, it's stupid. Anyway, moving right along, they go to the cave and they go in the water and they do all that stuff. Now, I thought this part was pretty cool because the Trills are not humanoid. The Trill symbionts are not humanoid. So they're alien in terms of, I shouldn't say alien, but they're going to operate differently than humans. And they obviously have some sort of psychological or I don't want to say psychographic, I don't think that's a word, but they obviously have a thing where, even without being connected, implanted in someone's brain, they're implanted in their abdominal cavity. They have an influence on the mind. They make a connection with the mind. So this idea that there's this water in which they can sort of, submerge themselves or float on top of, that they are able to, introduce an electric current into that and get in touch with their, psyche, I guess, isn't that far-fetched. I mean, we've seen it's science fiction, right? So that was cool. I didn't have a problem with that. And it was interesting to explore that, just because it's not something that was shown before in Star Trek that I remember, about how the Trill are, what their nature is. So I thought that was pretty cool, but it went off the rails when I guess some kind of trauma happens to Adira while she's in there, relative to the problem she's having with connecting the memories between herself and the symbiote. Anyway. And it results in her being sucked under the water. Like, what? And then Michael goes in, she lays back, they zap her with the thing, whatever, and then she gets sucked under the water. And then her consciousness and Adira's consciousness and the symbiote's consciousness are all like hanging out together. And that's fine. It's, we have Vulcan mind melds in this universe, right? So if that can work, this can work. That doesn't bother me. But they're there for a long time, like several minutes, doing this communal gathering. And how are Michael and Adira breathing? They're underwater, people. How are they breathing? They don't explain it. Maybe it's a highly oxygenated water, but they don't explain it. So what the hell was that? How does that work? How are they breathing? I don't know. I don't know. So I'm bouncing around a little bit, so forgive me. But at one point, at several points, the Trill homeworld people keep talking about how their society has been decimated since the burn. And I get the feeling it's connected to the fact that they don't have enough suitable hosts for their Trill symbionts, which I guess has always been a bit of a thing, right? Because it's always been the case that not every Trill is able to take on a symbiont. The symbionts, not every humanoid Trill is suitable for a symbiont. You have to be suitable in order to host one. So I guess there's always been a thing where there might have been a ratio problem of hosts to symbionts. And if the hosts, ever became too scarce, the suitable hosts, then you would have all these symbiotes that couldn't be joined. And if your society was based on, having a certain number of joined individuals, if that's, what it really means to be Trill, if that's where the uniqueness of your society comes from, and you can no longer do that to enough of a degree, then I suppose your society would be quote unquote decimated. It would certainly be changed. It wouldn't be, what you would want it to be in its ideal form. So I get that. But what's that got to do with the burn? How did the burn affect that? I'm having trouble connecting the dots there. So again, maybe someone can tell me in the comments how that might be the case, because I'm not getting it. It doesn't make sense. And what's up with the computer on Discovery? In the short trek that they had between season 1 and season 2, I think it was, yeah, they had that episode that I can't remember the name of. I'm gonna have to put it up there or over here somewhere, where the computer on Discovery is clearly, way more advanced than it was in the first season and the second season, and seems to be way more sentient than it was. So it seems, anyway, from something Saru was saying at the end of the episode, that this is because the sphere information is, the artificial intelligence on the sphere that they sort of incorporated into Discovery is having an effect on the computer. And that might be where that all comes from, what happens in the short trek that we saw before, because that short trek takes place 1,000 years in the future. Although I think the computer says that Discovery's been abandoned for 1,000 years. So I don't know what the relationship is there. But anyway, it seems like those two things might be connected. So the computer now is going to be super sentient, not to be confused with the Super Saiyan, super sentient aboard Discovery in the coming episodes and seasons. I don't know, we'll see, but that's certainly what it looks like. As Adira is going through her memories, we're, seeing her life before she got the host. Before she became a host, before she got the symbiote. And we have some scenes with who she refers to as her boyfriend, which I guess is supposed to be the transgender character that's coming to the series, or that we knew was coming to the series. And I'm a little confused. If the boyfriend is the trans character, meaning they were female but are now male, that's fine. So they're going to refer to them as he. Okay. But the non-binary character then is not that person. It's Adira. She's non-binary. So why do they keep referring to her as she? If she's non-binary, then that's not how that works, right? They don't use gender-based pronouns. So that's happening throughout the episode, and she doesn't correct them, or they don't correct anyone. I don't even know what pronoun I should use. She's supposed to be a non-binary character, but they're not incorporating that into how they're talking. She hasn't brought up that she's non-binary yet, that I recall. So maybe that's why. Maybe once she brings it up, I don't know, if they haven't adjusted the language. Another scene in this episode that I thought was completely horrible, and once again shows bad writing, was the dinner scene. I think it was bad for a number of reasons. Well, maybe only just one reason, and everything about it that I didn't like stems from that. These people are not behaving like Starfleet officers. It's like with Lower Decks. The characters on that show do not behave like Starfleet officers. And the people on this program very often behave in a way that I don't think Starfleet officers would behave. They're too familiar with each other. They're too emotional with each other. You know, this is not Melrose Place. It's Star Trek. They're supposed to behave like officers. This doesn't mean they have to behave like robots, okay? But there's a certain decorum. There's a certain level of detached, you know, stoicness that you're supposed to behave with when you're in an organization like Starfleet. And it's just right out the window. These people behave like college buddies that are hanging out at the dorm all the time. And that shouldn't be happening. So then they have a scene in this dinner scene where they all get upset with each other. And again, they act like people who are not in Starfleet. Starfleet officers would not act like that. And I don't know, maybe they were off duty, but they were all there in their uniforms. So I don't know. That's not how Starfleet officers behave. And Saru lets it get way out of hand before he says anything. And I'm just sitting there going, what is happening here? These are not Starfleet officers. They don't behave this way. And it was just, on top of that, it was just very, again, sort of one-dimensional. It felt to me very one-dimensional. Not that the characters are one-dimensional, but that the conversation wasn't at all nuanced. It was very top level, and there was no, you know, in terms of everybody was up here, like white knuckling it. You know, there was no, just bad scene. And the foul language on this show just doesn't stop. Tilly says asshole, pretty much. She doesn't get it all the way out, I don't think, but she says asshole. They use the word bullshit. Like, why? Yeah. It's unnecessary. It's not how Starfleet officers behave. It just drives me insane. They shouldn't be doing that stuff. But getting back to this business of trans character, because it keeps coming up when you see these scenes where she's interacting with her boyfriend in her memory. When they announced these characters, they announced that it would be the first non-binary character and the first transgender character. First of all, why isn't the Trill the transgender character? Because the symbiote goes from host to host over the course of a life, and sometimes they're male and sometimes they're female. So why wouldn't that be the trans character? And how does that not occur to you when you're including the character that whether you call it that or not, you have a transgender character by default? And once it occurs to you, how do you announce that it's the first one when you know it's not? You would have to know that it's not, I should say. So I don't know where they're going with that. Again, they're not counting the Trill as their transgender character. They're counting her boyfriend as the transgender character. But how could they at the same time not realize that the Trill is also essentially a transgender character, such that they would have announced the first one was coming into the show by way of the boyfriend? Like, how do you not? I just. And then why would you bother to even do the other one? Like, why wouldn't they have flopped it the other way? Why wouldn't the boyfriend be non-binary, and then they would make a story? If they want to tell stories about transgendered people, the Trill is the way to do that. It was done on DS9. If they wanted to keep doing it, they could keep doing it. They don't have to introduce a separate character and call them a transgender. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand. Don't understand. Watching that scene between Adira and her boyfriend, I kept thinking, is this like a YA after school special that I'm watching? Why? What is it with the writing on this show? Like, I understand they're going to depict relationships and there are going to be emotional scenes and they're going to be like soft scenes, you know, and romantic scenes or whatever. But like, these people are very young, which, you know, you didn't normally see on Star Trek because the characters were Starfleet officers. Most of the characters that you would see in scenes. So, and they were not like 16. Even Wesley was a little bit older. Um, and he didn't have any serious relationships on the show for good reason, because then you're diving into young adult territory, and that's not what this is supposed to be. So I don't understand. I just felt like I was watching a young adult novel turned into an after school special, watching that scene, and it was over the top. It was over the top. They didn't have to go, they didn't have to make it as sappy as it was. Okay, people? That's how they do things in these young adult stories. It doesn't belong in Star Trek. It was too sappy, and the characters are too young. Like, who's connecting with this? I don't understand. It's totally a Wesley 2.0 moment, except even Wesley never had these like overly sappy romantic storylines on Next Gen. And then right at the episode when Adira is basically hanging out with her boyfriend, in her mind, she says to her, "Well, how are you here?" We see her we see the boyfriend physically represented next to her in her quarters, but that's something that's done in sci-fi, right? They visualize, they give the audience a visualization of what's occurring in a character's mind, and that's fine. But why would she say, "Why are you here"? She knows why she's there. The symbiont has the boyfriend's memories. I mean, we've always assumed that the Trill symbionts are in touch with the memories and the personality of the host at all times. So the idea that in the mind of a Trill host, they have actual conversations with the past, host selves that they embody, as opposed to just sensing things or having memories, isn't that far-fetched. We've never seen it, but it's not something that was out of the question. They can get away with that in my mind. So why not write it that way? Okay. But why would she be surprised that it's occurring? I guess because she couldn't access the memories at first, but she knows she's supposed to. So when it starts to happen, why does she say, "Why are you here?" But that's really all I wanted to say about that episode. We've got next episode to look forward to. It looks like they find Starfleet, so that should be interesting, but I'm sure that's going to go off the rails in about 5 seconds. Although it is the future, so who knows? They could say anything, and there's no, we can't critique it, right? Because we don't know how Starfleet is in the year 3189. We have no reference, so maybe it'll be fine. But anyway, I continue to not love this show. It's just bad. I'll be back next week with my review of episode 5. And stay tuned for my next video, which will be before that. I'm going to talk a little bit about The Walking Dead and DC Comics. Until next time, my friends, peace and long life.